Last week we talked about a man named Jacob and Rebekah. We're in a series called The Games People Play. We're in a series called The Games People Play. We're looking at the dating. Y'all remember what dating? Dating game, the waiting game, the mating game. We're talking about dating, so I want to just clarify where we're coming from. And yet I have heard all week, this is a true story, I've heard all week, that the principles, notice now we're looking at principles, transferable, applicable principles that we apply to our lives. And all this week I've been getting calls and emails and notices from people who said, it may be, we may be talking about dating, but the principles apply to my life in other areas. So I want you to be open to that. And for many of you, your word and your reason for coming was that song right there. Okay, for many of you, and so I say that because I don't want you to put God in a box. I don't want you say, well, the choir saying now we're going to hear a word. No, you just heard a word. And for some of you, that's going to be the only word you're going to get today. That's not, self-deprecating or whatever. But for some of you, that was your word. So I don't want you to miss it waiting on something else. You reach up, you could almost, don't go, but you could almost go home right there because that's your word. And I mean that. God is a head lifter. He's a broken fixer. He fixes broken stuff. And so even as we go into this message, and again, it may not directly apply to you, but there are principles that we're going to talk about that will fit your life. We talked about a man named Jacob last week and his quest for a bride, We discovered that the text was not about dating. It was really about God building a kingdom, but within the picture of this man's life, Jacob and Rebekah, and how God brought them together, within that picture, there are principles that we learn. And last week, I intentionally overlooked a verse that I want to go back and pick up today, and that's going to be our launching pad for the day. But he said, go to the servant, go and get a wife for my son. See, that was the assignment. And he said, go and get a wife and bring that wife back. See, go get her, bring her back for my son Jacob. That sister's name was Rebekah. We called her Becca. Her name was Becca. And so little Becky was... So Becky was coming back. And so the servant asked a profound question. Genesis chapter 24. I want to pick it up there. The servant asked a question, and I want to come back to that question because that question sets us up for what is it like when you're waiting, when you're coming to a middle of a relationship or end of a relationship. I'm going to talk about that today. Genesis chapter 24, in the context of get a wife for my son. And again, this is not about dating. I mean, you can't transfer it. The rules were different. The culture was different. The laws were different. The guidelines were different. The mores were different. The society was different. But there are principles that we're learning. Here we go. The servant asked an interesting question. Chapter 24, verse 5, he says this. Servant said, now, Abe, what if this sister does not want to come? So what if she is unwilling to come? She doesn't want to come back with me to this land. He says, shall I then take your son back to the country he came from? He says, no, don't do that. He says, you're released from the assignment. Now watch this very carefully. He says, what if we go there and we make this offer and we present all the details of the match and everything? What if we build a relationship, we negotiate and talking about back and forth? And what if this sister doesn't want to come? What if, he says, what if she rejects him? How do you deal with rejection? How do you handle it when a relationship ends? How do you handle it when a relationship is over? How do you handle it when a relationship does not work? How do you handle it when they don't want you? Jesus jumps way down the road and he paints a picture. And in that picture, there's a principle of how to handle rejection. Okay? I'm going to come all the way over to the book of Matthew. In that picture, he reveals a principle. Listen now. And the principle is about how you deal with a relationship that does not end, a relationship that does not even get started, a relationship of rejection where you're rejected. While you're going over to Matthew, let me just put this out there. My friend Dr. Henry Cloud says this. He says, dating, listen now, is a period of getting to know someone and then figuring out what you do with what you know. I'll give you that again. I said a couple of weeks ago, dating is about gathering data. The most significant, the most valuable thing about dating is the dating data that comes. And Dr. Cloud says, it's gathering that data, and then now what do I do with that? In other words, you learn some things. I've learned this. I've learned some things about that person, learned things about me. Now, what am I going to do with that? Listen to that. Then he says, there is a certain, everyone says certain. There's a certain risk, he says. It's not theoretical. It's not what if. It's not a possibility. There's a certain element of risk in every dating situation. The nature of, listen to me, the nature of dating is that it includes risk. Tell your neighbor, dating is risky business. Once I said, child, I know. Let me tell you my story, baby. No, come on back. Come on back. Come on. Come on back, children. Come on back. So listen. So a dating situation, creating a relationship, listen, it always, not sometimes, it always, not sometimes, it always includes the element of risk. There is an inherent and congenital risk involved in creating and coming into a relationship. Get that. It's not possible. It's not maybe. You're taking a risk. That risk could go one way, it could go another way, but it will be a risk. And the dating situation assumes that both of the parties want to take that risk. It is a risk. And the assumption is, well, if we go, this morning I was asking, I don't even know what do y'all call it? Y'all still call it dating? What do y'all call it nowadays? Dating? Friends? Friends with benefits. Wait. Whoa, come on back, children. Come on back. Wait. Friends with a benefit. That's another, we ain't talking about that today. One lady said, we call it kicking it. And they thought she was old. I mean, I'm not. So what do they call it nowadays? Dating? Talking. Just talking. Okay, let me help you. It's somewhere between talking and benefits. I'm just saying. I'm trying to work this out. I'm just saying. It's somewhere in between. See? Listen to me. But whatsoever you call it, it's risky. That's what I want you to see. Now watch this. Jesus gives a picture, listen to me, of evangelism. In the context, nothing to do with dating. But in this picture, there's a principle that we're going to extract and apply to the issue of dating and creating relationships. It's found in the book of Matthew. Jesus paints a picture, see? And in this picture, it has nothing to do with dating. But in this picture, we're going to extract a principle, see, that's going to apply to the issue of how do you handle rejection? How do you end a relationship? How do you break it off? What do you do when it comes to an end? Now, he says in Matthew chapter 4, he says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. I'm going to chapter 10, so stay with me. Chapter 4, he says, here's what being saved is. It's becoming a fisher of men. Becoming a fisherman. See, I'm talking about fishing next week. He says, but follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Now, he then gives them a picture, and he's actually not a picture. It's a setting that really happened in chapter 10 that Jesus uses as a teaching moment. There is a scenario in chapter 10 that is a teaching moment that Jesus explains and expounds upon what he meant when he said in chapter 4, fishers of men. You with me? Here we go. In chapter 10, it's about verse 4. This ain't got nothing to do with dating. In chapter 10, he says, if anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, get your pencils. Shake the dust off your feet when you leave that town. Now, let me help you. We're setting up a dust-shaking seminar up in here, okay? Y'all gonna be some dust shakers when we leave here today, okay? Here's what, now listen. Remember the context. In Jewish culture, the foundational characteristic of Jewish culture is hospitality, okay? Hospitality. They value hospitality. So to go to a place, to go into a home, whatever, you are to be welcomed. You are to be welcomed. And so Jesus talks about the gospel being spread from town to town, city to city, whatever. So he says go, and he says go from house to house. Now when you come to a house, see, if it's a hospitable house, they'll receive you. Because the primary element of culture was hospitality. How you handle folk when they come to your house. See? Now, I've been to cultures around the country where the same thing was valued, high hospitality. I went, Reggie and I, several years ago, went to South Africa one time, first time, and they wanted us, the host wanted us to stay in their house. You know, stay in there, got a little bedroom, stay in their house, see. Now, you know the Bible says there are different gifts? Okay. Staying in homes is not my anointing, okay? I'm just saying. My mama wouldn't even let us stay all night with other folk. They could stay with us, but we never stayed with them. Mama didn't roll like that. So blame my mama. I just, no. So we get to South Africa, me and Reggie, and so we knew that we picked up. I said, this man is serious. I thought he was joking. We got the room back there and everything. Didn't have no heat in the house, and so he said, go back there in the room. We liked the froze. We liked the froze. But I didn't want to insult the man, see, because it was the culture that valued hospitality, see. But the next time I went, I had a reservation, see, down the road. Because my culture, see, needed a concierge and a guest, and you know what I'm saying? So I'm talking about how cultures deal now, see? Now, in that culture, when you go to somebody's house, they are to receive you. Now, here's what Jesus says. Now, if you go, see, and if they don't receive you, See? Now, in the context, he's saying to reject you is to reject the message of the kingdom. Y'all, I'm going to make sense in a minute. Stay with me. So he said, when you reject, because they're coming with the message of the kingdom. So he says, when they reject you, they've rejected God. They rejected Jesus. So he said, don't hang out. If they don't want you, if they reject you, he says, leave. And he said, now when you leave, he says, shake the dust. See? Now, here's the point. Because in that culture, they believe, that when you go into a house and the dust of that house gets on your feet, if that house rejects you, if that house is ungodly, God has another house down the road that will accept you. Here we go. So there are three assumptions with the dust shaking ministry. See? Number one, the first assumption is that the dust of the house that rejected you stays on your feet. Try it again. First assumption is when you go into that relationship, see, some of that relationship sticks to your feet, sticks to your soul. It's stuck on you. Number one. Here's the second assumption. But down the road, God has another house, see, watch this now, that will receive you. The first house rejected you. Watch this. But you're going to a place that will receive you. Now, here's the third assumption. What you don't want to do is take the dust from what rejected you and bring that into the house that's trying to accept you. So Jesus says, shake that stuff off of your feet. He says, the residue of what happened there, shake your feet. Because you don't want to take the residue of rejection into the new house of blessing. Does that make sense to y'all? So Jesus says, don't take that with you. Shake it off. Shake the residue. Deal with the conclusion and the calamity of your commitment. You made a commitment. You got into a relationship. Doesn't matter how far and how long. But it ain't working. It's not working. You've gathered the data, see, and the data reveals it's not working. So, when that relationship is over, what do? First thing is, you got to be done with that one. We talked last week about baggage, see? The idea of shaking the dust means you leave it behind. It means that you have walked, and on those days the floors generally were made of, they were, dirt floors, and you'd walk and walk and walk, and while you're walking in that relationship, dust is clinging to your feet. And so Jesus says, shake that stuff off of you. Why? Because down the road, see, there's a house, there's somebody waiting down yonder to receive you, and you don't want to take the dust of your disappointment into this new relationship of blessing. You still with me? Now listen to me. That sounds good. But that's hard. When you have invested, when you have put your heart on the line. When you have fallen in, you know what? When you fall in love, you give the person you love the power to hurt you. Say that too fast. When you love someone, that person must steward your love because they have the ability to crush you and hurt you. And so when Jesus says shake, he's talking about the lingering feelings. He's talking about the anger. He's talking about the sense of betrayal. He's talking about the brokenness. We just heard, when I'm broken, he fixes. A heart that's, let me tell you, you ain't been hurt till you get a heart hurt. And I hope many of you never do. Hope many of you never do. But you ain't been hurt, baby, till you get a heart hurt. So Jesus is saying the end of this relationship marks the beginning. This rejection, this cessation, this end marks the beginning. And you don't want to take the stuff into the next relationship. The first response is often, oh, I'm gonna get them back. I'm gonna get them. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get them. I'm gonna get them. In the book, Dating by Purpose, better get that book. In chapter 8 of that book is called How to Bow Out Gracefully. Ain't that a good spiritual title for it? Watch this. Dr. Holmes says this. She says, leaving a relationship can be just as hard as getting a relationship. Getting out of a relationship can often be as difficult as getting into one. So Jesus says, how do you handle rejection? Shake the dust. Here we go. So let me give you some examples first of what not to do. Okay, here's number one. Don't do this, y'all. You do not dive head first into a gallon of ice cream. I'm just saying. You don't turn you don't turn to habits and activities that hurt you when you really want to hurt them. All right, y'all never done that. Ain't nobody never done that, huh? You don't buy a dozen of Randy's Donuts. Those of you from around the country, if you ever come to Los Angeles, you want to go to Randy's Donuts, I don't get no money for that. I'm just saying. But here's my point. You don't turn to activities that'll eventually hurt you. You don't turn to alcohol. You don't turn to drugs. You don't turn to a life of immorality. You don't pay somebody back by lying on your back with somebody. Is this working? Number two, stay off social media. Quit putting your business out there, see, and bad-mouthing somebody. Don't get into the key decorating ministry. You take a key, start at the front part of the car, and you walk down. I have seen more keyed cars in romantic breakups. Here we go. How do you move on? Jesus says, shake the dust. And here we go. The word shake is used in several contexts. It has to do with, number one, what is stuck to you. Shake off what's stuck to you. The disappointment, the anger. Stay. Don't rush past that. Shake off what is stuck to you. Shake off the residue. Shake off what's clinging to you. Oh, I know it's over, but be careful. I'm going to help y'all. You might have to get a new playlist. Some of them songs. Okay, I'm the only one in here that's had song flashbacks, huh? You know what? Y'all ought to be shaming yourself. Y'all too spiritual for me. I'm telling you, this crowd over here. I'm talking about. You think you're going and one Saturday, Guy Black plays one of these old songs, and Guy Black gives you a flashback, and just the sound. Ain't anybody else had no song? You know? All right, I'm just. I know I ain't crazy. I'm just saying you got to make those kind of adjustments. See. Here's the next thing. In many cases, you have to cut contact. Let me stop right. I know. And here's one. Well, we can still be friends. Yeah. Don't use that. Don't use friendship as a consolation prize. Be careful that your disappointment does not birth bitterness. Hebrews chapter 12 says, there's a root of bitterness. Be careful that the root, where this thing starts, the heartbreak, the hang up, the fight, whatever it is, that does not breed and bloom and blossom and bring forth bitterness. So what can I do? Here we go. Let me give a couple of examples. Number one, I must remember who I am. No, it's very important. It's very important. If your total identity is with that person, you're in a world of trouble. You must remember, I am God's child. I am God's man. I am God's woman. I was God's woman before I got into this mess. I was God's woman in the middle of this mess, and I'll be God's woman when I come out on the other side of this mess. You got to start with remembering who you are. Your identity is always with Him. There's a verse there, speak the truth in love. Be truthful with yourself. Speak the truth to yourself. We usually think that means tell the truth to somebody else, and it's part of that. But another part is you be truthful with yourself. Okay? Jesus calls that shaking the dust. Here's the next thing. Speak. When you speak, listen to me. When you speak, it's very important. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Don't send mixed signals. Jesus says, when you speak, speak with conviction. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't be beating all around the bush. Don't have a prayer meeting. That's because some of y'all are real spiritual. Don't have no prayer meeting and laying on the hands and all that kind of stuff. Rip the bandage off. Listen. Let your yes be yes, your no be no. Now, again, if you don't play. Don't use breakup as a manipulation tool. Some of y'all been break up 4 or 5 times last year. Don't use it as a manipulation tool. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't follow, watch this. Don't follow the pattern of Israel. God tried for 40 years to deliver them from slavery and bondage. And for 40 years they kept saying, we ought to go back. Y'all missed that. Be careful that you don't find God's trying to move you out and you still trying to stay in. All right, let me go to the deep end of the pool. Anybody seen Keke Palmer's new show, Password? You ought to see it. It's a great show. Great show. It's called Password, see? And they give you these hints. So Okay, so none of this. This is no, okay? I'm going to give you the hint, and then you fill in the blank, okay? Here we go. It's called password. Here we go. Here we go. Call. Okay? All right, we're playing this game, and see, I'm saying don't keep going back. So password, the password is call. Somebody said telephone. No. Telephone call is not the password. All right. No, here's where I'm going. I'm saying don't keep going back. See, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. All right, one more time. Call. All right. Can I get a witness? The more God tried to deliver them, the more they kept wanting to go back to what he had delivered them from. The more God tried to deliver them, the more they kept wanting to go back to what God was trying to deliver them from. Here's the next thing. Don't blame God. Let me talk to you spiritual folk. Well, the Lord told me, God told me. Here's one. The Lord told me my season is done here. Don't blame God. Don't, if you've been trying to live before the Lord, before that person, now you're going to make God the bad guy. The Lord told me, I had a revelation in the middle of the night, and God told me that this season is up. We're done. Number two, don't blame me. If another man comes up to me and says, well, I heard that you said that. No, I ain't said nothing, man. I don't know your wife. I ain't seen her. I ain't seen the sister. Don't blame God. Don't blame me. No, I'm serious. Because you use us as an excuse. Don't use God as an excuse. No. First of all, did you talk to God when you got in there the first time? That's another conversation. I ain't got time for that. But often in our attempt to move on and get out, we make God look bad. See? Here's the last thing. Let's go home on this one. You shake, you speak the word, your yes is yes, your no is no. Listen, and you stand. You stand on the promises of God. Listen to me. Listen. Here's the promise. In this world, you shall have tribulation. But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Listen to me. Your social life, your dating life is not exempt from tribulation. It is a part of growing in the Lord, maturing in the Lord, and trusting God. It is a part of taking the risk that becomes a walk of faith. It's the promise that says that God's ways are not your ways and your ways are not God's ways. It's a promise that says, my God shall provide. Provide means to video, to see, before. It means that God is the God who sees you where you ain't yet. That's terrible English, but it's good theology. It's the God who sees you where you are not yet. And so I stand on God's promise that in this world, in this date, even in this marriage, I'll have tribulation. But be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. Here we go. I stand on God's promise. Here it is. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. Hold it. Hold it. There is a grammatical error in that text, in that translation. A more accurate translation is found in the NIV version. And if you look at the tense of the verbs and the action, the first one says, and we know that all things work. That implies that things work. We know, listen to me. But things don't work. Things are inanimate objects. Things have no volition. Things have no cognitive ability. Things don't work. And some of us know because we've been waiting on things to work out. How's that working for you? But a more accurate translation of Romans 8:28 is not, we know that things work. More accurate says this, we know that in all things, God is at work for my good. Y'all ain't got that, you missed it. I stand on the promise that in all things, God is at work. My son is a chef, and I've seen him make, dishes and stuff. He takes some of this and some of that, some of this and that, and he mixes it up. It comes out as a masterpiece. Any of those ingredients by themselves will make you sick as a dog. You're baking a cake. You're baking a cake. You got flour, you got butter, you got milk, go home and eat 2 pounds of butter. Because any ingredient by itself can make you sick. But God is a master chef. And when he gets up mixing and matching and mixing and matching and mixing and mixing, when he gets through mixing up the good stuff and the bad stuff and the sweet stuff and the bitter stuff and the smiles and the frowns and the joy and the anger, when he mixes all that stuff up, it comes out to his glory, to your blessing, and God still gets the praise. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Isn't it interesting that Jesus, in his proclamation of his anointing, he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He hath anointed me to do this, do that. And then he says, Jesus says, I am anointed to heal broken hearts. They just sang, when I'm broke, he'll fix it. Back home, they didn't have no sophisticated way of putting it. Mama and them used to say, he is a heart fixer and a mind regulator. Mama and them used to say, call on the Lord. He's a heart fixer and a mind regulator. He can fix my broken heart. He can reprogram my confused mind. Maybe you've never been hurt before. I went to I was at the school, University of Illinois, and I was going to went to another school. I won't call it a school because she may be watching. But and so I went to homecoming at that school. Loved this girl. Oh my God. My mama said, "Boy, you love that girl so much you stink." And so I literally hitchhiked a ride from University of Illinois to this school, this campus. And I got there, and we're having this party, everybody's jamming. And one of my fraternity brothers, a guy from St. Louis, called me. He said, hey, man, come here. I said, what's going on, frat? He said, man, everybody laughing at you, but nobody want to tell you. I said, what do you mean? He said, man, so-and-so been going with somebody else. Matter of fact, tell you what it is. He said, man, so-and-so been going with a Kappa. Now, I'm an alpha. Two things was wrong with that. Number one, she was going with anybody. Number two, she was going with a Kappa. All my Kappa brothers and frat brothers, Q brothers, we got a panhandle, any kind of thing going on over here. But I was ticked off at that brother. Broke my heart, y'all. It's a true story. It broke my heart. And I came back to that campus bitter, hard, insensitive, cruel and mean because of my brokenness. And I hear Jesus saying, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I am anointed to heal broken hearts. Everybody standing.